Hey, today on FlyWire, I've got another blast from the past, dug up from the archives of various hard drives. So stick with me on FlyWire. Hey, I'm Scott Perdue, and today on FlyWire, I have some people were talking about from that P38 video I did. That was a blast from the past, the file that I found on a hard drive. And guess what? I found another file. People were asking for more stuff like that. Well, this isn't eye candy. This isn't Warbirds, unfortunately. So if that disappoints you, I guess you could tune out. What it is it's a radio interview I did for my book, Pale Moon Rising, with Scott Leffler. And I'm going to leave a link to his website down below. But I just thought, hey, if you were interested in the blast from the past, here goes. Here's the skinny on Pale Moon Rising.
All right, so today I've got guest Scott Perdue, Scott Gunny Perdue, author of Pale Moon Rising, which is a novel kind of. It's a novel, based on some historic fact and with some historic things built into it. It's really a brisk read. And it's based on something that we all talk about on this show almost daily. It's based on the war in Iraq. It's based on the war on terror. It's based on September 11th. It's based on all the things, basically, it's based on all the things we've come to hate. But Scott has put it together in a way that makes it palatable. Scott, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on.
That's probably an interesting intro for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let me start with the most basic thing here, Scott. Let's find out a little bit about you. Now, you are a former military man,
yep.
Who still loves the military. It's evident, and yet you have this new love, which is writing.
Yeah. Well, actually, the love of writing predates my time in the military.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I was on the high school paper and the college paper when I was in college. So I always loved writing, and of course that was more the 5 W's and H, regular journalism.
Sure.
And I always wanted to write a book, but never quite had the time. I was always busy doing stuff. And then I found the time and the motivation and sat down and wrote the book.
How much harder is it to write this type of book? If you're writing for a newspaper, you're writing things that you already know the outcome of the story. When you're doing something like Pale Moon Rising, you've really got more of a blank slate than you're used to as a journalistic writer.
Yeah, you do. And the only way to really tackle it, in my view, or the way I could do it, was to outline it. Something you always fight doing when you're in school is, I don't want to outline it.
Oh, well, that's a whole extra step. Who needs that?
Yeah, who needs that? Well, in order to have the story hang together and flow, you really need to do a good outline, and that's what I did. I spent about 2 months actually outlining the book before I started writing it.
And the book is about a female fighter pilot and her trials and tribulations in the war on terror. Why did you go with a female, Scott?
Well, a couple of reasons. One is, women, they've penetrated into all areas of the military pretty much. And in a fighter squadron, they're very common. You see women just as much as you do men. So in a way, they're kind of underrepresented in this genre of book. And on the other hand, I've got 3 daughters, so it was actually an easy decision for me.
Okay. Is casting a female in the lead role, is it a statement in any way?
Oh, no, I'm not trying to make a political statement or anything. I'm just really trying to make a good story.
All right. Well, I wonder, because the enemies in the book, of course, are across the seas, and they tend to not appreciate women. And yet here in America, we do, to a much greater degree, obviously.
Yeah,
and so
that may be one of the things we're fighting for, is not just freedom for us as a culture, but freedom for individuals, whether they're male or female.
So I did wonder that going into it, if you had the female fighter pilot, because we can have female fighter pilots, and over there they don't do that.
Yeah.
So what? Tell me a little bit about the book. The book, of course, is Pale Moon Rising. Now, I have it in a softcover version. Is there a hardcover, or did you go straight to softback?
Well, it came out in a larger print version called a trade paperback, which is the same size as a hardback, and now it's in the a small version, a mass market paperback.
All right.
The book starts off with World Trade Center, with what happens with that on 9/11 and our immediate reaction to that, and then jumps right into the people in the military that are called upon to fight that, to respond. The people in the Air Force, in particular, Jenny Good, and she's in England, and the shock and everything of that happening, and then deploying and getting ready to go over there and fight, and also the Army guys, the Special Forces folks that have to go over there and fight it as well.
Now, how much of that the first chapter or so, when you've got the pilot in the cockpit and the knock on the door and they think it's breakfast, and how much of that is historic based and how much of it is stuff that you assumed? Is this taken from transcripts in any way?
No, that part of it isn't. I actually retired from the Air Force in 2000 and flew for United for 5 months, and then jumped over to fly for American Airlines, and that's what I was doing.
So it's based on how you figure things would have happened.
Yeah, that's actually how United did things. That was their cockpit procedures. So what I did was speculate and say, well, this is probably what happened to these guys, and totally by surprise.
When you were a pilot, did you at any point think, you know what, this is not good. We should not do it this way?
Well, after 9/11, I think it was a shock to everybody, because up until that point, all the training and focus we'd had on hijackings was, a hijacking would be you cooperated with these guys because all they wanted was some other political thing or something to achieve, so you were hostages essentially.
Right, and the assumption, of course, was that the terrorists wanted to land the plane.
Right, yeah, and not use the plane as a weapon. So that was pretty much. I mean, there have been some speculation, I think, that's come out that people thought about stuff like that before, but by and large, it was a total shock, and nobody had really thought about it seriously happening that way. So it was,
so when you were a pilot, this the way you did things didn't seem strange to you at all?
No, I wasn't prescient enough to.
Sure. Well, hindsight is always 20/20, of course.
Absolutely, yeah. So it was a shock to believe that, to understand that that's what happened, and especially like Flight 93, what incredible courage of those people
Sure.
to try to fight back in such a short amount of time.
Sure. Now, since you've left the private aircraft industry, I'm guessing you still have friends that are pilots?
Oh yeah, still have a lot of friends, and I still do a lot of flying myself. I've got a PT-17 Stearman, which is a World War II open cockpit biplane.
Yeah.
Used as a pilot trainer in World War II, and I love flying that.
All right. Well, let me ask you then, as a private airman, have things gotten more stringent for you?
There are more rules. There are things like what they call TFRs, temporary flight restrictions, that it causes a lot of planning and a lot of, sometimes a bit of a hassle to deal with. And VIPs move around, or they have a fire, or, college or professional, games,
right,
sports stuff like that happens. So there's more rules and regulations. You need to pay attention to that. But so far, it hasn't stifled.
What about for your friends on commercial airlines? Have they expressed to you, oh my gosh, it's so miserable now, we got to do X, Y, and Z?
Oh, there's an awful lot more rules and regulations, that go along with that. TSA
right.
and security and things like that. So it's more stringent than it used to be.
Now you have 24 years in the military, right?
Yes.
Were you a pilot in the military?
I was. I spent 8 years enlisted in the Marine Corps, and then got my degree. And the Marines didn't really want me to fly. They wanted me to be a grunt again, and I didn't want to do that. So I went in the Air Force, and I flew F-4s and F-15s.
What? Okay, so you've flown military,
yes.
You've flown commercial, and you've flown private. What do you like the best?
Well, I got to be honest with you. I miss the Strike Eagle every day.
Because of the speed and power?
Well, yeah, and the challenge and missions and all that other stuff. It's just a lot of fun to do. It's a great job, and I miss it, but you can't do it your whole life.
All right. So looking at your book through a military lens, Pale Moon Rising, what what are your thoughts on what we're doing military right now? Of course, we've got the war on terror, the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, and potentially the war everywhere else right now. What are your thoughts on our wartime policies at the moment?
Well, excuse me. I think that the war on terror is not. You can't really separate and say, well, there's a war in Afghanistan, there's a war in Iraq, there's the war here and there. It's all different chapters of the same conflict. We're fighting terrorists that are a totally different enemy than we've faced before. In years past, when we go to war, we fight a country and we fight their army, and victories and losses are quantifiable, and you can say, hey, we're making progress or we aren't, and so on. And nowadays, this war on terror is just totally different. It's sometimes it's covert, sometimes you don't know what's going on, sometimes it is. Everybody knows what's going on, but it's always little bits and pieces. So progress is not something that's easily quantifiable.
Sure. Well, if you equate the war on terror currently to, say, a checkers game,
yes.
The other side keeps making new checkers.
Well, and that's the way war is. Even if it's conventional, is the enemy. Excuse me. The enemy reacts to you, and you react to them. And the big thing is the way you win is you react faster, and you figure out what it is that will make them quit. So that's what we're working on, I think, right now, is trying to figure out what will make them quit.
Getting back to your book, and still militarily speaking here,
sure.
Who's your book written for? Is this written for military aficionados? Is this written for? I think you described it as a military techno thriller. Mm-hmm. Who's your audience?
The book is written for the average person, but I had to write it from the perspective of if military people are reading this, I want them to know that it's accurate.
Right.
Okay, because in one way, accuracy is part of the story, and in another way, it's I wanted to get the story right. That's kind of a journalism thing.
Sure.
But it's written for the average person, and I wrote it from the perspective of you as the reader, putting your butt right there in the cockpit, so you know what it's like flying the airplane. You know what all the things you have to think about and things you have to do, and what it's like to be in there, and also from the perspective of being on the ground, fighting the war on the ground.
Right.
So I put your boots right there on the ground with those guys fighting the war there.
Right, because the ground war and the air war, I would imagine, frankly, that the ground war is hell. I would not want my boots on an enemy soil. Whereas I could envision myself in an airplane. I could see that, but I wouldn't want to be part of it. And obviously you wanted to fly as well.
Yeah, I like it better in the air. I would agree with you on that perspective that it's a better situation fighting it from the air. But it's true, people fight it from the ground, and some people prefer it. I think the interesting thing is, in my experience in the first Gulf War, is it's a big unknown when you haven't been there before.
Sure.
It's a big unknown, and there's a lot of uncertainty and fear that goes along with that. But after you've been there a little while, and you know what the routine is, you know what the situation is, it gets to be more acceptable and not as bad as it could be.
We tend to, of course, write what we know, and so you're writing a military novel based on things that you're familiar with, that you understand, and yet you're writing fiction. Are the characters other people? Are the characters people you know?
Well, they're kind of composites.
Yeah.
I made up the characters to do what I wanted them to do, and used a lot of different people that I know to make them up. So they're a composite of real people.
Do those people know who they are?
No, I don't think so. Not as I haven't told them.
Yeah. Do you
read the book and tell me whether they think it's true?
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Do you plan on letting them know, or are you just going to let them find out in their own way?
Well, if they read it and ask, I'd be happy to tell them. I actually used a lot of the names of the people I've known and flown with and worked with. Their names are in the book, not all together. I used first name, last name, call sign kind of a thing.
Sure.
But yeah.
Huh. Interesting. Now, this is your first book?
Yeah, this is my first one.
What's your experience been? Obviously, you've got a little media tour going, which is why you're here with me today. Which, by the way, I appreciate. How's the whole process going?
Well, it's going pretty good. Of course, if you're not Tom Clancy, it's pretty tough to penetrate. But I think the response has been pretty good and interesting so far. I've gotten a lot of good comments, very few bad ones. So that's encouraging. That makes me feel good. I mean, the bottom line when you write a book is really the kick is when people read it and enjoy it and tell you that, and I really do enjoy that part of it.
Sure. Well, yeah, you're one up on a lot of authors because you're writing something that A, people are interested in. B, you know what you're writing about. A lot of authors are just like, let's write a book about X, and they just write, and they're not there, which means that they don't transport the reader there.
Yeah.
So you're one up in a lot of ways, and then C, you really know the aviation industry, and you've got a little bit of clout because of some things that you've done between your military and your commercial, and you're also an assistant producer for a TV series, right?
Yeah, that's right. The show's called Wings to Adventure. It's on the Outdoor Channel, and it's ostensibly it's a story about. I mean, it's a TV show about airplanes.
Right.
But in reality, what we found is really it's a story about people. You know, airplanes bring the people together, and that's how the show's tied together. But really, it's about people, and you know, there's just so many interesting people out there, and it's a lot of fun.
Huh. Now, how long have you worked on that?
The show's in its second year.
Okay. Forgive me, I've not seen it. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Sure. It's Wings to Adventure on the Outdoor Channel, not the Outdoor Network, but the Outdoor Channel.
Right.
And, it's a half-hour show. We do two profiles of airplanes and the people that fly them, and then a destination you can go out, which is a place you can go out and fly to and do something there. And then we talk about gadgets, or we talk about tips on flying and stuff like that.
Aside from aviation, other interests?
Me, I'm fascinated by a lot of stuff. I like history is one of my favorite topics, and international relations. And this is remember the Chinese curse about may you live in interesting times?
Right.
I think that may be exactly what's happening.
Sure, without a doubt. Well, Scott, our time is short. One more thing I want to touch on, though.
Sure.
The cover of the book.
Yeah.
And the title of the book. So I guess that's two things, although it's really more of an A-B question. What is Pale Moon Rising, and what's the deal with the cover of the book with the purple mountains and the moon in the background?
Sure. The title of the book is really it's kind of allegorical to me. On the one hand, it speaks to how I think we reacted as a country to the hammer blow of 9/11. And then on the other hand, it the term actually comes from a rather obscure English poem about a lady who sort of reminded me of the main character, the heroine, Jenny Good. So it kind of fit pretty closely there. The cover itself is, that's a Strike Eagle, and that's actually a 492nd Fighter Squadron airplane. Just a fantastic picture, and that is the squadron that's in the story, that's in the book.
Where are these mountains?
That mountain is actually in South America, to be honest with you, the one on the front cover. But it's as rugged and looks just like the ones that are in Afghanistan.
I thought it was neat because it's purple. I mean, it's visually appealing.
Yeah, it's just a tremendous picture. So I wanted to put a lot of action and kind of represent what the book's about.
All right. Well, Scott Perdue, author of Pale Moon Rising, available through Mako Press. You can get it on Amazon, I take it?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's on Barnes & Noble. You can order it from your local bookstore or see me on scottperdue.com.
How's she selling?
Pardon?
How's she selling?
Well, pretty good. The funny thing is you'd never really know exactly how it's doing until 6 months or 9 months.
Sure.
In fact. But it's going pretty good, and I'm real happy about that.
Excellent. Scott, I really do appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on. I sure enjoyed it.
You're more than welcome. Have a great day.
Well, that was the interview from the Wayback Machine, and I hope you like it, and I hope makes you interested in buying the book. Well, it's on Kindle right now on Amazon, and soon to be on paperback, and then eventually there's a hardback version that's going to come out again. So republishing, so to speak, or making it more available. So anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on FlyWire.